Call the meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thanks everybody for joining us. We just wrapped up our workshop in the basement for the fiscal year 2025 budget. Clerk shall note that all city council members are present. Mayor Jacobson is excused tonight, which is why you get to listen to my ugly voice. Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations. We had one scheduled for the VHA Medical Foster Homes. Unfortunately, the person to give that presentation is unable to attend tonight due to illness, so we're going to postpone that to a later meeting. Moving to the next presentation is employer support for the Guard and Reserves Employer Patriot Award for Bryan Myers.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken. I'm an Air Force veteran. I volunteer with the Employer Support for Guard and Reserve program. The intention of this program is to ensure a smooth relationship between the Guard and Reserve members and their civilian supervisors and employers. What we do is we make sure that both parties are familiar with the Uniformed Services Employment and Reemployment Rights Act. If you recall briefly, that's the law that says you can't fire them if they go on a deployment. Within that program, there's other elements that include rewards and recognition programs. And Petty Officer First Class Daniel Stevenson nominated his supervisor for the Patriot Award, which is to be recognized for understanding that often when he's gone, it creates challenges in the workplace where they got to juggle work schedules around, get people to take their place and things of that nature. So I'm going to bring Daniel on to have a few words, and then we're going to present the award to his supervisor.
Good evening, City Council, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Stevenson. Like this gentleman just said, I'm your Parks Maintenance Supervisor, and I'm also Petty Officer First Class in the United States Navy Reserves. I'm honored to help present the Employer Patriot Award to Mr. Bryan Myers, our Parks Maintenance Manager. This award recognizes the extraordinary support Bryan has showed to Guard and Reserve employees like myself. Under his leadership, I've received unwavering support to fulfill my military duties while thriving in my civilian role. Supporting the Guard and Reserve is one of the few ways a municipality can have an outsized impact on our national defense. The City of Post Falls exemplifies this, providing flexibility and fostering a culture that honors the sacrifice of those who serve. Bryan, your commitment does not go unnoticed. You are a true patriot and an outstanding leader for our team. Congratulations, Bryan.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Bryan, for all you've done for the city and continue to do for the city. You're a great asset. We appreciate you. Quick announcements. Post Falls City Hall and city business offices will be closed Monday, September 2nd in observance of Labor Day. Police, fire, and rescue services for life-threatening or in-progress emergencies may be reached by calling 911. The police department will be open for walk-in emergencies. For water department emergencies, call 208-773-3517. There will be no trash pickup on Labor Day. Following the holiday, trash pickup will fall one day late and return to normal pickup schedule on the following Monday. Do we have any amendments to the agenda?
We have none tonight, sir.
Do we have any declarations of conflict, ex parte contacts, or site visits? Seeing none, moving on to the consent calendar.
Item A is minutes from the August 6, 2024 City Council meeting. Item B is payables, August 6th through August 20th, 2024. Item C is June cash and investments. Item D is the fiscal year 2024 audit engagement letter. Item E is the Ridge at Post Falls plat application. The Ridge at Prairie Falls plat application. Item F is our next adventure zone change rescind decision, ZC-23-4. Item G is our next venture zone change agreement, ZC-23-4. Item H is surplus Kubota tractor. Item I is Addendum 2 to Appendix 2 of the Prairie Crossing Construction Improvement Agreement, CIA. And item J is Legion Park Master Development Agreement, SUP-23-4 and SUBD-23-6.
I have a couple questions about some of the
Please.
items, if that's okay. Item D, I was curious, Mr. Faulkner. Alpine Summit CPA, do we choose the auditing company or is it assigned to us?
We get to choose the audit
Okay.
firm, and every so often I do go out for an RFP to provide audit services for the city.
To the
In the
city.
past, they have been our auditors, but prior to was Magnuson McHugh.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
And then item E, the Ridge at Prairie Falls plat application. Should we be reviewing the actual platting, like, map or grid for this? I didn't see it in the packet when we approve it.
So the plat applications come into the engineering department, and it's
Okay.
just the final engineering approval. They look at it. It's a giant Mylars, and so
Okay, so we
they
shouldn't
are on
expect-
file if anybody wants to look at them, but they are just reviewed against the preliminary plat applications that have already been approved, and it's just for compliance.
Okay. And then item, I scribbled over it, I, looks like. So the addendum to this Prairie Crossing Construction Improvement Agreement, have there been any monetary consequences or projects that have been delayed because this project wasn't done in the time stipulated originally?
That might be a question for Rob. I'm not aware of any monetary issues.
Madam Councilor Robert Paulus, City Engineer. In terms of their delays in the project, there hasn't been any impact as far as staffing or costs of what we spend. In them not doing work, we haven't been sending people out there as regularly. We have had a couple of other projects that are out in that area, so we still do drive by and see whether or not there's activity or non-activity.
Okay. And it seems, I mean, you can drive on this roundabout now, right?
Yes, that roundabout was accepted for public use. It would have been late November of 2023. We put it into operation. There were some minor things that were missing, but those were mainly landscaping and some final items which did not affect the safety of the public in order to utilize that roundabout.
And that's what the extension is for the landscaping and those couple of other items?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much.
And also the road construction north of that roundabout into the development
Okay,
on the
so
developer's property.
There's more to be done there as well by October?
Yes,
Okay.
they need to complete Zoros Road, which runs approximately a quarter mile north of Prairie, and then Trade Avenue, which is the east-west roadway within that subdivision, needs to be done. There's some water improvements that they're working with Ross Point Water to get done and approved so that those items can go into operation as well.
And you expect they'll be done by October?
That is what their most current schedule is, and as part
Okay.
of this amendment shows. And then if they don't meet that, then we'll be in an area where we can go after them to either pull the bond or force quicker action.
Gotcha, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Other council comments? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
Move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Second.
Clerk, take the roll, please.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to public hearings, we have one tonight, and that is the fiscal year 2025 budget hearing. I'd like to open the public hearing.
All right. Good evening, Council President. I'm so used to saying mayor, it threw me off for a second. And council members, tonight is our 2025 budget hearing. I'm going to try to stand close to this because the acoustics in this room are a little off with the wall being gone. So if I'm hunching over and leaning over, it's because I'm trying to be heard. So tonight is our 2025 budget hearing. We have a budget hearing annually before we set the budget for the upcoming year. Included in that budget hearing is a hearing on budgeting or reserving foregone authority for the coming out of this fiscal year. The focus is on our general fund for 2025. We will have a discussion of the enterprise funds as well, but there will be less detailed information concerning the enterprise funds. Overall, our general fund budget is just over $2 million less from fiscal year 2024. That largely represents one-time dollars and projects that were completed in the past year. So as a sort of a warm-up, this is a difficult budget year. We've seen some reduced state revenues, less new growth and annexation revenue, and as a result of those things, we're having to see increased reliance on local funding, as well as some pretty limited capacity for taking on new expenses. So for folks who may be wanting to testify tonight, a bit of history about what the budget process looks like, as well as our budgeting history. So the council sets a budget amount, not a levy. What that means is, assume we have a city that has a budget of $10 million, that's the number you're setting. You're not saying we're gonna levy a tax against each property in a certain amount. You're saying we're gonna set a budget at 10 million. And then the levy amount is set by dividing that budget against all of the assessed taxable property values in the city. And that derives the levy amount that derives how much you will pay towards that budget amount. Individual taxes can change based on valuation changes. So if the value of your home changes in relationship to other homes or in relationship to other commercial properties, the amount of taxes you pay will shift. And we've seen that historically over the last 5 years or so. Residential values have outpaced commercial values, shifting a large amount of the tax burden to residential property owners and away from commercial owners. We're starting to see that shift back a little bit, where the commercial is starting to catch up a little bit, and so we're starting to see a little bit of a correction on that side. It's also driven by what happens with levies from other agencies, which we don't control, and there's a number of taxing entities that makes up your total overall taxing bill. In Idaho, as we set a budget, again, we set a budget amount, not a levy. The state statutes have a number of limitations on how much we can raise that budget amount. The first of which is we can take a special levy that tries to recoup costs related to new construction and annexation to generate funds to pay for the services, to pay for the new growth. So every time you add a new home, a new business, there's additional service needs that come with that new home or that new business. So this levy is really there and intended to raise revenues to provide the services, to hire the new police officer, to hire the snowplow driver, to provide services for that new growth area. That has been capped for the last few years at 90%. That was a change a couple of years ago. What that does is it shifts a portion of that cost of providing the services to that new growth to existing residents and existing payers. So in just easy, simple math, if it's capped at 90%, that's passing 10% of that cost off to existing taxpayers. Similarly, on the closed urban renewal areas, as we close urban renewal areas, that is capped at 80% of the market value of that urban renewal area. We don't have that happening this year, so it's not really relevant to our discussion tonight. Overall, for existing payers, the most the city can raise its property tax budget is 3% annually over the highest amount in the past 3 years. The idea there is that the folks who are paying that fund are paying the ongoing cost of providing the services that they receive. So if there's increased cost to inflationary cost, so the cost to provide the same service to you, in theory, we're trying to recoup the cost of providing that service to you. There is a larger maximum increase at 8%. So when you add up the new construction, the annexation, the urban renewal, and the 3%, it's capped at a maximum of 8%. Living outside of that amount is what's called the foregone balance. The idea there is you create a foregone balance by not raising taxes annually and putting that money aside in case there's a future need. The goal there is to keep taxes lower by allowing local government to hold off on raising those taxes until there's a need to have those funds. The city's current foregone balance is about $3.5 million. What that means is that the city council over the years has been pretty conservative in raising the budgets. Another way of looking at it is today the tax funded portion of your budget could be $3.5 million higher annually if the council had been taking the allowed 3% each year over time. There are caps on on what you can spend that foregone authority on. You can take an additional 1% each year towards operational needs. That's ongoing authority that compounds year over year. You can take an additional 3% of the budget towards a capital project, which means either a capital project that you think of or a piece of equipment that has a life expectancy in excess of 10 years. Those all count as capital projects. That is one-time authority. So if you take $300,000 towards a capital project, that $300,000 doesn't roll over and compound into next year's budget. So it's a one-time addition to your budget. Some city budget history since 2009, which is 15 years. The city has taken no additional revenue increases outside of that new growth, annexation, and urban renewal closure areas. In that time, the cumulative inflation is about 47%. As I talked about during the workshop, that's essentially if you were buying a car in 2009 dollars at $20,000 in 2024 dollars, that car would cost you $30,000. It's a healthy increase in inflation, a not so healthy decrease in your purchasing power. What that means is because we've not been taking the general tax increases, that over time we've relied heavily on growth and urban renewal closures to carry all of the new services for growth, as well as offsetting the cost of providing ongoing services to existing projects. So I'm going to run through these quickly because you've seen them, but some of the issues we're struggling with this year, and we're not alone, most of the entities in Idaho are facing some of these same struggles. Inflation is outpacing our 3% budget cap. So if we're looking at in the Northwest region, the CPI is up 3.7% year over year, meaning that things are more expensive by almost 4% than they were a year ago that we have to purchase. Construction costs are up about 2.3% over the last year. Wages in Idaho for all occupations are up about 8.3% year over year, which is a pretty healthy revenue or wage growth. We all know this is not shocking to anyone. It's really expensive to live in Kootenai County, or more expensive significantly than the US average. Partly as a result of those things, last December the council elected to give a 30% raise to our police department sworn employees so that we could remain competitive with some of our competitors in the area, and recruiting and retaining new police officers, which has largely been successful, but that's about a $1.1 million debit coming out of our upcoming budget because it came in the mid-year time. We're seeing some increased insurance costs. This is largely nothing to do with the city. It's really dealing with large storm events across the globe that is causing havoc in the reinsurance market. Lots of investors leaving the reinsurance market because it's a risky bet currently. Until that stabilizes, that's going to probably continue over some time. This year, we're looking at a 30% increase, which is about $100,000. We're seeing some healthy decreases in state revenue this year. The highway distribution dollars are one-time dollars, but it's about $772,000 this year, less than last year. The sales tax revenue is down about $762,000. So if we look at that and projecting out what we're anticipating to see in state revenues for next year, we're looking at about $2.4 million from highway dollars that are earmarked only for transportation projects, about $4.3 million in sales tax distribution that can be spent on sort of any expenditure out of the general fund, and about $780,000 in round numbers from liquor sales distribution dollars. That's a nominal bump in the liquor distribution. The others were seeing less revenue this year than we saw last year. Looking at anticipated local revenues, new construction dollars for fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 25 annexation dollars, we're estimating about $340,000 coming from that area. Fees and franchise fees at about $5.2 million. And then looking at tax dollars towards our budget, if there was no tax increase or general increase in the budget this year, you'd be looking at about $16.6 million. If you were to take a 3% increase, that's another $462,000. 1% towards the operating foregone is about $160,000. So if you add the 4% of the 3% increase, the 1% foregone, and the new construction annexation, that nets just under $1 million. Trying to provide some context for that, if you back out the reduction in sales tax and the increases in insurance, and I just picked two, I wasn't trying to to capture all of the changes that we're looking at. It leaves about $125,000 in additional new revenues that you would be looking at, which is just about, it's a little bit more than the cost of adding one police officer. So the big picture, zooming out a little bit, difference from the fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25 budget. Here's a breakdown of the property tax values year to year, city fees, franchise fees, the state distribution dollars, the grant dollars that we're anticipating, and then fund transfer, and then other, which I'm going to let Jason explain if you want to know what's in the other account. So generically, you're looking at roughly, like I said, $2.1 million less in the big budget. A lot of that, like I said, is grant dollars, one-time projects that are coming to fruition. That is based on an assumption of a 4% increase. If the council elects to take no increase or a less increase, obviously that number is going to drop on the top line. So moving from the revenue side to the expenditure side, our funding recommendations for this year are pretty limited for new expenditures. There are ongoing expenditures that we'll get to in just a second, but on the general fund for personnel, we're looking at adding one additional new police officer as a lateral hire. That's about $113,000 cost to bring the officer on. Reclassifying 4 existing maintenance worker positions in Public Works at a cost of about $5,000 each. For capital, we're looking at purchasing 4 police vehicles, doing a minor rapid flashing beacon project, additional improvements to Warren Field that will be done in conjunction with a grant award that we just received, and then buying replacement work beds for new vehicle chassis for the Parks Department. On the wages and benefits side, this would provide for an up to 4% merit if that merit is earned, and also if the employee is below the top end of the range for their position. It would provide for a 3.5% COLA. Our COLA, we typically look at what's happening, what is PERSI doing with COLAs, what are other agencies doing. PERSI is looking at a 3.5% increase on their COLA. We're trying to mirror that. So you're looking at, for an employee who's in the middle of their range, who has earned that merit increase and who gets the COLA, you're looking at a 7.5% increase, which still puts you in the range that we're looking at Idaho's all occupations increase over the past year. As I mentioned earlier in our workshop, we have a goal of trying to get employees through their range from the entry-level cost at the bottom of their range to the top of their range in 12 years. To do that, it assumes being able to meet them at 4% a year. And once they get to the top of that range, they don't qualify for merit any longer. They only get the COLA. The budget also includes room for a 10% healthcare cost increase, as well as budgeting for our insurance increase. Shifting now to our dedicated funds, in fiscal year 25, coming for the vehicle replacement fund, we're recommending setting aside $750,000 into that fund. That would be up from $500,000 last year. We are slowly increasing that number over time as we try to build a sufficient fund balance so that we can fully pay for all of the vehicle replacements as they come due. Out of this year's expenditures, we're looking at replacing 2 dump trucks, 3 pieces of equipment, 7 medium-duty pickups, a couple of police cars for detectives and code enforcement, and a couple of trailers. And that is funded out of the replacement account. Our dedicated fund for street replacement, we're typically funding that right now at about $645,000 annually. Our typical expenses are in that $250,000 range as we sort of save up money to do larger projects. This year, we are recommending expending about $3 million. A portion of that, a small portion, goes to the Pleasant View 5th Avenue design. The largest piece is to reconstructing a portion of Celtics Way, which is $2.8 million, and that's coming out of that dedicated fund. Other types of dedicated funds that we have, we're completing, hopefully this year and wrapping up the end of next year, the completion of Spokane Street, which is about $1.8 million. That's grant funded. We just received last week the final notification that we've been awarded the grant to complete the frontage improvements for Warren Field. That'll be grant funded as well. Out of the cemetery fund, we're going to put in a fence for $42,000 projected. Additionally, and I didn't list these separately because it runs onto multiple pages, we're looking at 13 separate impact fee funded projects that total about $5 million. And those are funded exclusively out of impact fees, which are dedicated funds. Finally, moving to the facilities construction dedicated fund. We're recommending about $7.5 million in this year for longer term projects. This is not all happening in 1 year. A small portion of that would be to wrap up the City Hall remodel that's going on currently. A small portion of that likely carries into the next budget year starting in October. So that would about $230,000 to wrap this project up. Putting money towards the construction of the Public Works Operations Center and the Parks Maintenance Facilities parking lot. Those are longer term projects that we're starting to work on, not all of which is going to happen in this upcoming year, but we're setting aside the funds out of the fund balance so we can move the ball forward as far as we can in this fiscal year. Annually, we're contributing right now $740,000 plus half of whatever amount is left in the budget at the year's end, and that's based on a policy adopted by the City Council. As talking about capital, Council asked staff to take a look at what would happen if we took an additional 3% of foregons to use towards a capital project. State law allows us to do that. It's limited to 3%. It would generate just about $460,000. It's one-time fund, so it doesn't roll over into future years. It's $460,000 that's generated this year. Next year, it would generate zero. It's a one-time expenditure. It can only be spent on identified projects. And as we talked about in our workshop, if you project that out over 20 years, it performs about the same as, if the goal is to spend down that foregone balance, it performs about the same as taking 1% annually towards operating costs. If we do that, it does save us some costs in the future because some of the projects we're looking at will ultimately require a bond election, and which will require borrowing and debt service. So if we do that, it's going to be less future borrowing. It's also going to allow us to front load some of the expenses so that we build them today, which saves us the increased construction costs from inflation over time. So if council elects to go down that path, I think our recommendation would be to fund items out of our facilities master plan. That's in a pre-existing plan that we've had on the books for a couple of years. As you just saw, we have projects that we're working towards in all three of those areas that would allow us to use those funds next year towards the completion of one of these three projects. Moving into enterprise funds. In the water fund, we have projected revenues of about $4.1 million. There's a breakdown there of where we think those funds are coming from. Operating expenses of about $3.3 million, and a balance in operating of about $12 million and capital of about $5 million. Our expenditures in the enterprise fund for water this year, we're looking at regrading one position, and we have some capital projects planned. We're looking at updating the water master plan over 2 years. It's a $250,000 project over those 2 years. A $1 million contribution out of the water fund to fund the water fund's portion of the operations center for public works, as well as 2 replacement projects, one a distribution project and for Westwood, the second being a Wellhouse 4 supply project. Water reclamation enterprise fund, we're anticipating about $20 million in operations revenue against expenses of about $8.8 million. We have fund balances right now of about $19 million in operating, 2.5 in treatment capital, and about 28 in collections capital as we build dollars towards large projects. This year we are looking at, in the personnel side, regrading and we're reclassifying 2 positions. On the capital side for the treatment plant, we're beginning a solids and dewatering project that's going to be about $13 million. We're looking to set aside an additional $4.1 million towards land acquisition. We still need a couple hundred acres of additional land application property on the Prairie. So this dollars are there. If a piece of property comes up for sale that would work for that, then we'd have some money set aside to be able to take a look at that property. We're also looking at a secondary treatment expansion project. That will likely slip to the next year, but we're budgeting it this year, so we have the money in case that we have the horsepower to get that one started. The collection side, the projects that we're looking at, we have Salties Forceway Rehab project for $5.5 million, Fisher Sewer Basin project for $4.5 million. We're also looking at 12th Avenue Force Main. This one will likely be postponed as well at $5 million, as well as starting work on North Regional Lift Station. And there's a fair number of lifting there for our project staff, so a couple of those likely do slip to next year. Capital highlights as well, we're looking at one smaller stormwater project on 6th Avenue coming out of that fund. Solid waste is our other enterprise fund. This is services that we contract out. We have a project, our projected revenues of about $4.6 million. Our current rate is at $13.17. It's going to go to about $14.03. Our operating expenses, which are the contract services with the providers, about $4 million, and we have about a $1.2 million fund balance that allows us to cover unexpected expenses. So looking at the impact of any potential increase, if you have a home that's assessed at $650,000, if there was a 4% increase, you're looking at roughly a $44 increase. If the house is valued at $800,000, it's about $57. The thing that this doesn't capture is what happens with market fluctuations. If your house goes up or down more than the mean, we have a hard time projecting that out without it knowing people's addresses and what their property values have been. This doesn't reflect what the other taxing entities do, and it also doesn't reflect the value of state property tax relief dollars that have been budgeted this year. We do anticipate that amount will be roughly 7.5% to 12.5% off of the person's total tax bill. So whatever your tax bill would normally be, you're looking at a 7.5% to 12.5% reduction from that total amount using the state property tax relief dollars. So motion options. Tonight you can direct us to present an ordinance, which we need to do because we have to set a budget. That budget can be based on the budget presented. If you want to modify our proposed budget, you're certainly free to do that. We would ask you to just please provide us direction on if you want to make an increase in the budget size, what's that percentage you're looking at? If you want to leave it flat, let us know that so that we can go back and make the numbers work, because we have an obligation to pass a balanced budget. So we want to make sure that we bring you a budget that does that. Finally, it would be to direct staff to present a resolution on the foregone balance. Options there are to use up to 1% on operating, up to 3% on capital projects, or potentially to reserve any of that dollars if you choose not to take a full increase on the 3% this year. So with that, happy to answer questions, and any technical questions, I've got the money guy behind me who knows this way better than I do.
Before I ask for questions from council, one thing I forgot to announce is anybody who wishes to testify, there are forms on the lectern in the back. Please fill those out. Bring it to the clerk if you wish to testify. Council, any questions for Warren? Seeing none. Is there anybody who wishes to testify?
No.
So I'm assuming that, Warren, you do not want to rebut?
Not unless you want me to.
With that, I will close the public hearing. Council, comments, discussion?
That's a lot of numbers at once.
Well, since nobody's jumping up, I've got, if you may indulge me, I'm going to go off the rails a little bit. So there's several numbers that Warren presented. One, I had thought that the last actual tax increase in Post Falls in 2012, I was corrected. It actually hasn't been since 2009. So as Warren said, the cumulative inflation, and that's just the CPI, which excludes volatile things like food and fuel that tend to be higher than the CPI, but the cumulative inflation since the last time Post Falls took a net tax increase is 46.6%. So that's extremely significant. So the city has done a whole lot in doing more with less through improved systems, efficiencies, et cetera. So credit definitely goes to staff for being able to hold the line for so long. Unfortunately, due to massive inflation and large losses in projected revenue from the state, sales tax and highway funding primarily, I don't think it's any longer tenable to hold the line anymore. These aren't the only problems the city is facing either. I, like many others, have noticed a disturbing trend lately, and I should note that I'm speaking only for myself here, and my views may not represent those of the council as a whole or of the city staff. The American Republic was created as a bottom-up society. Individuals are to have by far the greatest amount of authority and control over their own lives. Local governments would be a distant second, providing services directly to those who reside within their small boundaries. Being local, residents of local government districts wield a great deal of influence over those governments. For example, it is much easier for a resident of Post Falls to speak in front of the city council than to travel to Boise and speak in front of the state legislature, which is in turn much easier than getting an appointment to speak directly and in person with the President of the United States. Similarly, an individual's vote for the office of president is competing with well over 100 million other votes, whereas your vote for the office of Post Falls City Councilor is only competing with a few thousand other votes, many of which are cast by your friends and neighbors. Your vote has far more influence at the local level than at the state or federal levels. Finally, you have the opportunity to vote for every elected position in the city, whereas you only have the opportunity to vote for 3 of the 542 elected federal offices. I don't count the VP there since it's tied to the president, and less than a dozen of well over 100 elected state offices. In other words, at the federal and state levels, your life is impacted mostly by people you never had the chance to vote for or against. This is not the case at the city level. You can vote for or against all of us, which means you have tremendous influence here. This is why local authority is absolutely a moral good compared to state and federal authority, or God forbid, global authority. The duties and responsibilities of the federal government are explicitly laid out in the U.S. Constitution and are generally limited to international affairs, maintaining a military, and regulating relations and resolving disputes between states. There has been a whole lot of mission creep in the last 200 plus years since the U.S. Constitution became the law of the land, obviously. This isn't the time or place to delve into great detail on that, except to say that a lot of us are, and have been for a long time, very concerned about the federal government's ever-increasing influence over state and local politics. Such top-down control runs very much counter to what our founding fathers envisioned. That said, what I want to speak about tonight is the disturbing trend of increasing state control over local governments in Idaho, which is probably not as apparent to most people because it generally doesn't make the news. Just over the past 5 years alone, numerous laws have been passed by the Idaho legislature that restrict local governing bodies. Several, including House Bill 220, Senate Bill 1086, House Bill 191, House Bill 294, Senate Bill 1291, and others, restrict with whom local governments may contract. Such restrictions inevitably result in higher administrative costs, as local governing agencies must certify that those with whom they are contracting are compliant with state law, which isn't particularly easy or cheap to do. Since those costs are paid by tax dollars, this increases the burden local taxpayers must bear. In the cases of these specific bills mentioned, I happen to agree with the moral stances the state has taken. The concern is that nobody holds their position forever, and eventually folks I tend to agree with often end up replaced by people I don't agree with. Once we allow the state to control with whom local governments may contract, there will be nothing we can do to change that if and when the state ends up controlled by people whose morals and principles we may find distasteful. The state can decide for itself who it does or does not want to contract with. The city of Post Falls and every other local governing body should have the same right. Remember, as citizens of Post Falls, you have far greater influence over us than you do over the state legislature in Boise, most of whom you never had and never will have the opportunity to vote for or against. More germane to tonight's discussion are the recent bills restricting the taxing authority of local governments. For many years, the taxing authority of local governing bodies has been limited to a maximum increase of 3% per year. With such limits alone, frugality is punished. If we're fine this year, but we might need more money next year, then we'd better take the money now because the state won't let us take it later. To solve this problem, the state created foregone taxing authority, whereby taxing districts who are frugal can bank unused taxing authority until it is actually needed. Under these conditions, the most prudent thing for a city council to do is to wait to exercise taxing authority until it is absolutely positively needed. And remember that the last net tax increase enacted by the city of Post Falls was way back in 2009. So we've been stacking significant taxing authority into foregone since then. In this way, taxpayers aren't put on the hook for speculative expenses or for known expenses that might have a chance of being covered by grant funding or some other mechanism. It seems like a sensible system, right? Apparently the state disagrees. Enter House Bill 354, which requires local governments to pass a resolution to roll unused taxing authority into foregone, where previously they had rolled into foregone automatically. This isn't that big of a deal, but it does add pointless administrative time and cost to do what used to be automatic, which costs everybody money. Then there's House Bill 389, which caps cities' new growth annexation levy authority to 90% of total value and the urban renewal district closure revenues at 80% of total value. Where they came up with these limits, I have no idea, nor does anyone I have asked. If you believe, as I do, that new growth should pay for itself, the state has assured with this legislation that it won't. As a result of these limits, the city has had to exercise its taxing authority to make up for the losses in revenue new growth has historically generated, meaning existing residents are having to foot part of the bill for new growth. House Bill 389 further restricts local government's access to foregone taxing authority to 1% to fund city operations, putting an effective cap of local taxing authority at 4%. As you're painfully aware, inflation has been much higher than that over the last 4 years, so the purchasing power of cities has shrunk under these new restrictions. Post Falls has thus far found ways to do more with less, but that can only go on for so long before we either have to bring in more money or start cutting services. House Bill 389 further caps local government's exercise of foregone taxing authority for capital expenditures at 3%, and also removes those funds from the budget base once those dollars are spent, further limiting local taxing authority in the future via state dictate. So now we've come full circle, where it was most prudent not to exercise taxing authority until we absolutely positively need to. It is now, under the new state-imposed restrictions, most prudent to exercise that authority based on inherently imperfect predictions of what we'll need in the future, and if we end up not needing it, give it back later. The only other alternative is to wait until we absolutely need the money, then borrow it, saddling the taxpayers with interest expenses until enough tax revenue can be raised to repay the loan, which likely would take years under the new state restrictions. Finally, there's no guarantee the state won't restrict taxing authority of local governments, those that you, the voters, have by far the most influence over, even further in the coming years, which will make all of us ever more reliant on the state for basic services. So as much as it pains me as a fellow Post Falls resident and taxpayer, I recommend that we exercise our full taxing authority permitted by our masters at the state for the upcoming budget year. The 4% maximum increase for operations won't even cover the loss of projected sales tax revenue from the state, much less the inflation the actions of the federal government has foisted upon us. I further would be amenable to taking the additional 3% foregone for capital expenditures to help fund the upcoming expansion of the police department, public works facilities, and parks facilities to maintain the potential risk of incurring debt service expenses for those projects. However, as we learned in the workshop this morning, we wouldn't be in the position to need to borrow money for those projects for another tax funds is limited every year. So that's what I have to say about it. Anybody else?
So, no new taxes no new net tax increases since 2009.
Right.
But the money that the city has spent has increased since 2009, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so while we weren't using tax dollars that we've taxed from the residents of Post Falls, we've been using other monies to do additional projects in the city, add additional staff to the city, take on additional operating costs from the city with other monies that are coming from other places that are decreasing this coming year, right? We're looking at just from the state over 14,000? No, 750 plus 750,000, so 1.4 million. So that's going down. We're looking at operational costs between staff increases, what we agreed to pay PD, what we want to give like a 7.5% raise to all staff. We're looking at over $2 million, but we're only asking to increase the budget. If we take the 3 or 4%, $650,000. So my concern is that while we haven't actually taken an increase, we have actually grown. Like, we have actually been spending more money. And now that we've gone 14 years later, and that money is going down, we have to replace that money because it's operational. It's not just capital that we're spending. It's not just one-time dollars. These are dollars that we have to find somewhere to keep the lights on, to keep people paid, and the tax increase itself isn't going to cover that. So in order to be in favor of increasing the taxes 3 or 4%, I would like to see that our operational costs only increase the amount that the taxes would fund, so that we can get back to having, like you cited, local control, local authority. We're not reliant on state funding. We're not reliant on new growth, which is what seems to have been funding a fair deal of the additional operations of the city. And I really think that that's how we find a sustainable budget here. So I appreciate that increasing taxes isn't always a good look, but it seems like perhaps it should have been done earlier in the game. But we were flush with a different kind of cash, essentially, so we didn't have to do that. Now that cash is decreasing and we're having to come up with additional funds. So if it's what we need to do to stay sustainable, I agree with that, but I don't want to increase operational budget or operational costs outside of what the 4% tax increase in operations that we can use it for would create.
Just to clarify for those watching, so government funding, of course, is brutally complicated, and I've been doing this for more than 12 years now, and there's still a lot of things I don't fully understand. But the majority of the increased budget that the city of Post Falls has seen has been due to more people living in Post Falls and paying taxes. So if you have 10 people paying $10 a piece, you got $100 to spend, and if that grows to 15 people paying $10 a piece, now you have $150 to spend. So nobody's paying more. There's not an increase in the levy rate that the city is asking for. Of course, we don't set the levy rate. The values of each individual property do that, but that's where the primary increase in the budget comes. Of course, there's two ways we can raise funds that we have control over. One is the property tax portion of it, and the other is the fees portion of it, which is a separate hearing that we've already had. So fees, for example, have funded the improvements mandated by the EPA and the Idaho DEQ for the water reclamation facility. So we've all paid substantially higher fees to fund that multi-million-dollar project, for example. So that increases the budget as well.
Can I ask about your house example, though? That's not exactly true, right? Because we determine how much we're going to tax the 10 or 15 homes. So actually, if we go from 10 homes to 15 homes, the money that we make doesn't increase because we decide how much money we're going to tax it. And then, so if we keep the tax, our budget the same, and now there's 15 homes instead of 10 homes, they actually pay less per home. So by building more houses necessarily doesn't increase our budget automatically because the budget works the opposite direction, correct?
Well, kind of. If you're gonna provide the same level of service to everybody, including newcomers,
Right.
then it costs a certain amount of dollars per person, let's say, or per household. So if it costs $10 per household to provide whatever parks and police protection and road maintenance and keeping human waste far away from human activity and all the things the city does, then when you add 5 more homes to that 10 homes, it's going to cost you, 50% more.
Right.
So everybody still is but it still costs the same per home.
Sure.
But the budget necessarily increases to provide the same level of services to more people.
But instead of increasing the budget to make up that difference in taxing, we used other non-levy dollars to make up that difference previously to this because we didn't increase the tax.
So everybody still paid the same. This is far oversimplified. The same rate essentially. But there's more people paying that rate, which means bigger budget.
So we did take new construction, so
Right.
as those new homes came on, they came on with their $10. So that was added to the budget, so that property tax budget has gone up. We just haven't taken the 3% increase, so we haven't taken the inflation increase on the property tax budget.
Mhm.
One quick correction, we have not had the fee hearing yet this year. It's next
Oh.
council meeting.
Forgive me.
Right. Okay. I think I'm still fine with
But,
my
yeah,
argument,
but
which
you're-
is that we've been spending other dollars that weren't our levy dollars, and now that those are going down, we have to come up with a way to replace them. So to be in favor of an increase, that would have to be the only amount that we increase our operating budget.
So our property
be done.
tax budget is about 35% of the total general fund budget, correct? Right. Okay, so,
Yeah.
correct.
Thanks.
Yeah, Councilor Malloy spoke, I think, very eloquently, and that mirrors my own feelings as well. I share his frustration with the system that we have to operate under, and in particular with the federal government, who just keeps increasing the money supply. We wouldn't be suffering a lot of the problems we're suffering as local taxing districts if they could, keep control over the money they spend. But they want to keep printing money and keep increasing the money supply, and that puts strain on everybody. We see that putting strain on households. We see the cost of groceries going up, and the cost of paving roads and plowing streets and hiring staff and everything else is going up here too. And if we keep our budget at the same dollar amount while inflation is going up, that's effectively a cut in real spending power. And we've been mostly facing that for the past 15 years. And we've been able to get away with it because of the growth, as has been stated. And that's not a sustainable course. And the reason we're here is mostly because of inflation. And that's really the purpose of the 3% cap, is supposed to be to account for inflation. And we've been able to not take that as Councilor Malloy said, because we could operate under this idea of we can take it later when we need it. And now with the state law changes, the incentive structure is different, and so our options before us are different. And we're here to make good decisions as responsible stewards. So I think we're in a position where we have to take the 4% increase to be responsible, and we probably have to continue to do that for a while, at least until Congress is able to get spending under control, if that ever happens. So I'm on board with that. I'm also open to the idea of doing the 3% for capital projects. There are good arguments for and against that one, so I'm curious to hear what other people think, but definitely we need the 4% to make up for even just the inflation, and it's not even enough for that.
Yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit on my opinion on this, rather than restating what everyone has already said. I think, first of all, I would like to just reiterate that the efforts of the city council over the past 15 years, we talk about generating revenue from other sources rather than increasing the levy rate. I think it's in a tremendous effort to keep the tax burden off of the residents as much as possible. And that can only be done for so long, and I think that's what we're facing with today, is we're putting off the inevitable 3% to try to offset inflation by other means, and I think the time has come to where we can't do that anymore. On the note of increasing our capital expenditure, foregone levy dollars, as we kind of learned in the workshop earlier, the long-term effect of that, it probably isn't as advantageous as taking a 1% over time. But as we have seen in the last year or two, we don't know exactly what our taxing authority will be on that foregone balance in the next 20 years. And so I would also be in favor of entertaining 4% increase operational and a 3% CapEx moving forward today.
I'm going to echo everybody. I'm the same. I think the capital 3% is good. Like you said, Nathan, that's long run, probably not the best route, but we also don't know if it's going to be there in the long run. And then I'm for the 4% with the inflation and everything. I think it's a good move.
Councilor Jove?
Yeah, as much as I hate to increase it, because I'd like to not be able to, and we've had a good track record of 15 years of not doing that. The state has cut what we're able to receive and now creating a deficit, and we have to fill that somehow. So as much as I hate to, I am in agreement that I think we need to raise it.
I would like to say, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
As far as finding an advantageous time to do it, I think in light of the state basically borrowing ahead and banking money that is ours and now oh so generously giving it back to us, it may be the most opportune time to see in total a 7% increase if our projected rebate and our total tax bill is at that 7.5% to 12.5% as we're expecting. So it's effectively an offset that, I don't know, it feels good on paper, I guess. I don't necessarily like raising our rates either, but now may be an opportune time to do that.
And a concern I have too is that I have a feeling that we're not going to be the only city to exercise what little taxing authority we have left. And then the state is going to jump to correct a problem that they created by further restricting local control. So, Phil, I don't know what the best way to do this. Would it be two separate motions, one for the 4% for operations and then a separate one for 3% for capital?
Yeah, I think that works. You could combine it all in one motion as well, but the foregone will come back as a resolution, whereas the budget itself with the 3% increase, the 3% and the 1% will come back in the ordinance as well as the resolution. So I would craft it as one motion.
And this motion is only to direct staff to create that budget. It's not to approve the budget yet, correct?
It would be to approve the budget, and then staff would create the final documents to finalize that budget, just like we do for any other ordinance.
And then that would be approved as well through City Council?
Yes, it would come back to City Council for final approval.
As a public hearing?
not as a public hearing. This is the public hearing. This was the public hearing.
You're gonna get so good at your job having to tell me how everything works a million times.
I'm working on it.
So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
I would move to approve the fiscal year 2025 budget hearing as presented, in addition to a 3% foregone tax for capital expenditure.
Second.
I think we need to name what those capital expenditures are.
Yeah, and I think we can cover that in
Yeah.
the resolution when we bring that back.
Okay, so,
But you can.
I mean, as far as,
I guess I would add to that the capital projects to be funded would be either the PD expansion and/or the public works new facilities and/or the parks maintenance facility.
Or you could just tie it to that 2021
2021
master plan.
Oh, there we go.
Projects that we've already identified.
Even better.
Second.
And we have a second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
All right, motion passes. Moving on to unfinished business and returning ordinances and resolutions. We have our next venture zone change ordinance ZC-23-4.
Do we get a presentation on this?
No, this is one of those returning ordinances for a project that was already approved. This is the adopting ordinance to actually change the zone.
When did we approve it?
It's in the staff report.
Was it in 2001?
It was on May 7th, 2024.
Oh,
So,
I have questions about this ordinance, if I may.
sure.
Okay, is there a fee schedule for the inspections, the certification, the appeals, exemption hearings tied to this?
So the ordinance before you is just to change the zoning classification.
Oh,
from
I'm so sorry. I think
industrial to community commercial services.
I'm like one agenda item ahead. I'm so sorry. I'm like, no, I need more information. I do have a question about it. The zone change agreement cites that there's 0 residential. I think it's item 2.5. I shouldn't expect to see that specific verbiage in the ordinance itself, right? It's just in the agreement?
No, just in the development
Okay,
agreement.
thank you. Does anyone else have a question? Okay, I move to approve our next venture zone change ordinance, CZ.
This is one of those fancy schmancy ones at the top, the two-stepper.
I know, I was gonna, place the ordinance.
Bam.
Good Lord. On its first and only reading by title only while under suspension of the rules.
Second.
A motion and a second, please take the roll.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
An ordinance of the City of Post Falls, a municipal corporation of the state of Idaho, providing for a change in zoning classification for the land described in Section 1 of this ordinance from Industrial I to Community Commercial Services, CCS, providing for amendment of the official zoning map to reflect the change, providing that all prior zones applicable to the lands described in Section 1 are hereby superseded, and providing an effective date.
Now can I do it? I move to approve the ordinance. Our next venture zone change ordinance, CZ 23-4. And direct the clerk to assign the appropriate number, that it be published by summary only.
Second.
Motion and second, please take the roll.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving on to new business. We have several items here. First up, proposed critical materials ordinance and memorandum of understanding with the Panhandle Health District.
Good evening, Council President Malloy, members of the council. My name is Craig Bornpole. I'm the Utilities Manager for the City of Post Falls. I'm here tonight to go over a proposed critical materials ordinance, which would provide protection for our drinking water source. So some discussion points we'll go over tonight. A quick review of our potable water source that we use for our drinking water. some past protection efforts to protect that source from contamination, what the future of protecting that source might look like, which is why we want to have a hand in that, and we're proposing the ordinance and MOU to further those protections, why that is important to Post Falls. We'll go over some other considerations and provide an opportunity for questions. So, overview of the Post Falls water system. We have 4 storage reservoirs which provide pressure and water storage. And we're drawing water through just under a dozen wells to provide that source water. And each one of these vertical lines goes down into the Prairie aquifer, which is our source water for not just our drinking water, but it provides commercial use, industrial use, our irrigation use. So many uses of water feed come from our water system. So the source for each one of those wells is the Spokane Valley Prairie aquifer. The overview here, you can kind of see 2 different blues. The blue shapes that we're more familiar with in the upper right-hand corner and bottom are Coeur d'Alene Lake and Lake Pend Oreille. The lighter blue color represents the boundary of that Prairie aquifer. A lot of the systems or cities or even private residences in here are drawing their water from that Prairie aquifer. It is their sole source of water, so it has a designation of a sole source aquifer. Beyond that designation, the Prairie aquifer has an additional designation as a sensitive resource aquifer. And it's really the hydrogeology and the geology of the area where we live that leads to that designation. We have a lot of gravels and sands, which make the aquifer very, very productive. We have reliable source that we are drawing thousands of gallons per minute from our wells. So that productivity of the source is really a benefit we take advantage of. But it's also a feature that can put that source at risk. If contamination gets in there, it can move through the aquifer very quickly. And the sands and gravels don't provide a good barrier from contamination between the surface and that aquifer water, which from where we're standing is about 170 feet below us. So those features put that source at risk. So it has that further designation as a sensitive resource aquifer. There's been historic and ongoing monitoring through wells throughout the Prairie, looking for any contamination that may be in there. That's an ongoing effort which has taken place for dozens of years to make sure that we are protecting that source. So past efforts. The critical materials at fixed facilities over sensitive resource aquifers rule, the CMR, or I'm probably going to call it the critical materials rule, was developed in 1993. What is a critical material? A critical material is any liquid, semi-liquid, flowable, or water-soluble solid that has a material data safety sheet or a data safety sheet that fundamentally is a contaminant that we wouldn't want to end up in that source water, is what a critical material is. So there was a rule in 1993 developed. The overall goal of that was to look at handling practices, spill containment, operation and maintenance for any facility where critical materials may be. And for more than 20 years, it was the Panhandle Health District that was administering that critical materials rule over the Prairie aquifer. So some regional examples of past efforts. What's shown here is inadequate stormwater drainage from a facility where there's petroleum products. So it wasn't getting that good treatment that you would want in a stormwater swale, which may allow that petroleum to go down through the gravels, get down into the aquifer and contaminate our source. Through compliance efforts with business owners, that swale was rehabilitated to provide that treatment that is needed. Another common area that is looked at is shops and other areas where they do maintenance on big vehicles. The petroleum products in there, even the greases when they're washing off trucks could pose a risk. So making sure that the facilities, that the oil water separators are properly operated and maintained, make sure there's an end-of-life plan for when these are pumped out, making sure they're being pumped out. And it was the Panhandle Health District who was doing a lot of those reviews and working with the business owners to make sure that was done appropriately. I will say that the City of Post Falls pretreatment program has worked with representatives from Panhandle Health District in some of these facilities if there's maybe a question if it's connected to city sewer or if we're looking at the different materials being used, if it's appropriate to permit them. So we have had interactions with the staff at Panhandle Health District for a long time. So when the system is working well, water is moving through, that groundwater is moving through. We're drawing it up through our wells and distributing it throughout our distribution system. But as I said, that sensitive resource aquifer designation highlights the really risk that contamination could pose to our water system. So you could have a contamination event, a spill, or an ongoing leak. It could be pretty far away from our wells, but due to the productive nature of our aquifer, it could be drawn into that groundwater, and then we could draw it up into our city wells. So really trying to protect that large area as best we can is what's important with the CMR. So looking forward and why we're talking today. Well, in 2022, the Idaho legislature deemed that health districts are not state agencies, and therefore they didn't have rulemaking or enforcement authority on their own. So because of that, the critical materials rule was withdrawn from their purview, and that put our aquifer at risk. So at that time, we had discussions with Panhandle Health District staff on if a city ordinance somewhat matching that CMR would be appropriate. We realized that would take some staff time to do, and before we went through that effort, we came to you and said, does this look like something we would want to look at down the road? A couple of the members are new onto the council here, so giving you a bit of that history that we have brought this forward before, but bringing it back, we did receive authorization that it is something we'd want to look into. And so we crafted that CMR to match the style guide of our ordinances, and that ordinance is what's provided in the council packet for consideration. So the city ordinance includes very similar definitions, very similar rules and requirements, and I'll get to why that's pretty important in a slide or two, but really that ordinance that is in the packet matches what that CMR that was in place for dozens of years looked like. Also in the packet is a memorandum of understanding with Panhandle Health District, which would designate some of that authority, almost all of that authority, back to Panhandle Health District to administer the ordinance on our behalf, so that it would reduce the burden on staff time. It would allow them as the subject matter professionals to continue that program that they're used to running. It would allow for them to write certificates after they inspect facilities. Our water reclamation facility is one entity that had received regular inspection from Panhandle Health District, and we have our certificates posted in our break room. And then also back and forth reporting if we view something that we think might be a violation of the ordinance, we'd reach out to Panhandle Health District. They would inform us if they come across an issue that needs addressing as well. So why is this important to Post Falls? Well, we think that the ordinance would directly benefit our water users, protecting that water source, and not having that protection could put that at risk, which isn't just pose a risk to human health, but would be expensive. If we needed to install treatment and ongoing operate that treatment at each one of our wells could be very, very costly to do. So really we're looking at the ounce of prevention method here. So a few other considerations. If it is adopted, it would be administered via existing mechanisms. So as stated, Panhandle Health District currently administers the program, and it is funded through the Aquifer Protection District, an appropriation through them. And also, we're not alone in this effort. The City of Coeur d'Alene has already adopted an ordinance matching the CMR rule, and Kootenai County is in the final stages of adopting a similar one as well. And this gets to why we wanted to craft our ordinance as close to the rule as possible. So we didn't end up with a patchwork of rules that, oh, we've crossed Hutter, we need to remember that it's a different rule. Really tried to match so that we could get that unified enforcement that we've been used to. So a quick recap of discussion. The attached ordinance is a conversion of the previous CMR, allows for continued protection of the Rathdrum Prairie aquifer. There is a memorandum of understanding for administration of that. It doesn't financially burden Post Falls and provides a local solution to a local issue, one in which we are not alone. Before we get to any questions, I will say a couple items. One, Alyssa Giersdorf is here. She's our environmental specialist, worked closely with Panhandle Health District. And we have a couple representatives from Panhandle Health District here as well, if questions come up that are beyond my capacity. If we do want to move forward with this and approve it, it would come back for formal adoption with the numbers, the process that you just went through. And the MOU, we're not seeking approval of that right now. We would seek that at the same time the ordinance is adopted. The version included in the packet was unsigned. The one for approval would be signed for formal approval at that next council meeting. Now we're ready for questions.
Council, any questions for Craig? Nope.
Yes.
Yes?
I was just gonna let somebody else go first. Sorry.
Anybody else ahead of Samantha?
No, great. Okay. Is there a fee schedule associated with any of the steps that are cited in the ordinance, the inspection, the certification, appeals violation, or an exemption hearing?
There is not a fee schedule. The Memorandum of Understanding delineates that the costs responsible with the program are assigned to the entities. So Panhandle Health District would be responsible for all of the costs that they incur for the administering the program. And an important point there, if their existing appropriation goes away, we wouldn't be on the hook financially for their continued administration of the program.
I guess my concern is more for the businesses that are seeking these certifications. Are they going to have a fee to get them to have the inspections done like we do for other permits?
They're not directly assigned a fee for that process.
Okay, and that wouldn't be something that would be managed by Panhandle Health? If for some reason there was a fee associated with it, it would come back through the city?
If I understand the question, if the appropriation went away, we would probably end up in a year or so of, I'll say, enforcement discretion. The ordinance would still be on the books, but there may not be the same administrative mechanism. And we would be having discussions with Panhandle Health District had they secured another way to financially run the program. Or if it was something that we thought would be worthwhile to put dollars towards, it'd be coming back as a budget request for future council's consideration.
I guess when we say, and I'm sorry to piece this out, but I really want to make sure that we're doing what's in the best interest of the businesses in town that do this. Although I do appreciate protecting the aquifer. I think this is a great step that we're taking, and I'm glad that we're making the move to do this through the city. But perhaps my concern is that it sounds like the funding is for the program itself, so perhaps the staff and the costs therein, but we fund our community development program, but we still have inspection fees. And so it's those fees that I'm concerned will be delegated to some other entity, and we won't have any control over them.
So there would be and maybe I can ask Panhandle Health District. I'm going to give an answer, and then I'm going to look for a yes or no. How's that?
Okay.
Panhandle Health District does not assign any fee for the work that they do. So the entities do not pay an inspection fee.
Okay.
And there would be no fee that we would be putting on our fee schedule associated with this. It is all funded through, it's a different, first off, is that, yes, okay.
That's correct. Okay.
So the Aquifer Protection District is funded through, there is a fee associated with that. So parcels pay into that program. And it's a county-managed board that makes recommendations and assigns dollars for things like the critical materials program or other evaluations relative to the aquifer. So that funding mechanism is what's used. So the individual businesses do not pay for the individual inspections.
Like a liquor license, they wouldn't have to pay
They
every
do not have to
year
pay anything like that. Nope,
Okay, sounds
nope.
great. The exemption section that I read through, what would be an example of a situation that we would want an exemption? If we're trying to protect the aquifer, it seems like we wouldn't want to really exempt anything. But I would imagine that there's a reason, and I'd love to hear it.
Going through my Rolodex of why there may be an exemption. Let's say a facility could show compliance through a different mechanism than what is explicitly listed in the rules. So there's rules for secondary containment in the critical materials rule. They may be able to show compliance with containment some other way than is exactly listed in there. So that might be a situation that would be appropriate for an exemption. So the protection is still there, but it may not meet the strict definition in the
So
rule.
an exemption for the process by which the material is contained, not an exemption for how much is allowed to be leached into the aquifer. Is that correct? Okay,
Yep.
cool. Get to my next tabby here. Okay, so I think that this is still in the exemption section. There's no appeals for the exemption process at all. So there would be no way for a business to appeal if their exemption was denied, or for the public to appeal if their exemption was approved.
There is, sorry, I should stay close to the microphone. There is an appeals process, and that is one area that city staff may have a role down the road. So the normal course of business doesn't really require anything beyond what we're currently doing. but some of the appeals or may go before a hearing board, and we would have a role to play there. It's my understanding that Panhandle Health District does a great job of what I'll call knock and talk, and that basic education, which has kept any issues out of strong compliance, need for strong compliance. And so to date, they haven't had major compliance issues because they have that good groundwork, and everyone understands the value of the aquifer here and what that value is that we're putting at risk. So it's pretty easy to bring those businesses along.
Okay. Item J says no appeal may be taken from the director's decision. The director's decision will be deemed final for the purposes of judicial review. And this is just for my reminder field, if you could help me. If this is a judicial review, that's like what we do for a zone change, right? So there needs to be a criteria for that is followed, different than annexation?
So different.
Okay, then that's fine. Then if it's different, I'll just leave it. And then in the appeals section, it says that a hearing officer will be assigned, and I didn't see that defined anywhere else, so it looks like the director term is defined, but I guess I'm just concerned that if there is an appeal, who is the hearing officer that gets assigned if someone is to do that appeals process? Is it just a different staff member at Panhandle, or would it be a city employee?
It very well could be any of those. And the memorandum of understanding, as part of the city responsibilities, as part of, let me make sure I don't misquote. So as part of Panhandle Health's responsibilities, would assist Post Falls in, I just read it, in finding qualified hearing officers, provide recommendations on applications for exemptions, et cetera. So if reaching that stage, it would be in consultation to find that qualified
With the city.
hearing officer. Yes.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you so much.
Excellent questions.
I have one. If this law was changed at the state level in 2022, I know government things move slowly, but this is more than 2 years then since that change. What was the reason for the delay, and what's been happening in the meantime? There's been no inspections and no kind of enforcement about that?
There has been ongoing ground game of knock and talk and continuing some informal inspections. And so they have been working through this process, and we've been working through trying to get the ordinance crafted so we could bring it to you guys. I don't want to say as soon as possible, but yeah, getting through that process. So if we did reach a situation where more enforcement was needed, we weren't just bluffing, so to speak. But they have been during their normal course of business trying to do as much as they could to continue the program while these different entities are getting things on the books.
Okay, so that's still been going on. It's just we need this piece for the enforcement if something gets to that stage.
It formalizes it for sure.
Right. Okay, yeah, this sounds good to me. Part of living in a first world country is protecting our natural resources. And I actually like this setup where the authority is held by the city and delegated rather than set by the state, because this is local control. And trying to set this up so that we have a kind of a consistent framework with all the different districts over the aquifer. I think this sounds good, like a good idea.
Further comments? All right, with that, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve proposed critical materials ordinance and memorandum of understanding with Panhandle Health District.
Second.
A motion and a second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye. Up next, purchase and sale agreement with Treend, I don't know how to pronounce this, Treend, Schons, Lundy Easements and Property. Sorry if I butchered that.
I believe that is correct.
Hey.
Good evening, Council President Malloy and members of the council. Andrew Arbini, Projects Division Manager for Public Works. I am making a presentation on the Lundy Boulevard property and easement purchases. I am not Jackson Fleshman, but rather making this presentation on his behalf this evening. This is really a culmination of his efforts, along with John Beecham, Public Works Director, over the last year in negotiating both these easements and the property purchase. Just quick clarification, this presentation includes item B and C under new business. So separate items, all connected to this project, all presented here. So the background, rather summary, staff is requesting council approval of the purchase of 2 easements and then 1 piece of property that will facilitate in the installation of a new water line. Have several slides put together this evening, giving a little bit of the history. I'll provide some details on the easements as well as the property purchase, give a little bit of the next steps and timeline following an approval this evening, and then recapping our recommendation to council and have some time set aside for any questions. So in 2021, the city commenced the replacement and installation of the new outfall. That's the water reclamation facility outfall between Lundy Boulevard and into the Spokane River. As a result of that project, the city entered into an agreement with the adjacent property owner that would provide service, city water service to the adjacent property owner. That agreement came to council, I think that was in July of 2022. Following the approval of that agreement, the city began easement and property negotiations in order to construct that water line to serve that property owner. This is a screenshot of the actual water line plan. So around the same time we started property negotiations, we also entered into a contract with the city's design consultant to draft a layout for the water line. You're looking at the area of Lundy and Iron Horse Circle, the Arundel Mobile Home Park, and then at the top of the screen would be the Centennial Trails just out of view. So that would be our connection point into an existing water main. We would continue that main south down to Lundy, and then there's a lot of lines, but ultimately making a connection to serve the property owners that is off the screen to the south, down below. So this crosses 3 parcels, and as I mentioned, it's a purchase of 2 easements and 1 property purchase. This is another illustration. This is really showing the description of this is actually included in the agreement. This is the legal description with the 2 different property owners, so with Treend and Schons. This is an easement for the water line coming through their parcel. Speaking on the same owner, we've also negotiated a purchase from that owner. That's on the left box. And that is about 25 feet in wide. The legal description may correct me in that. But it's a portion of property, and I'll describe it further in the next slide. It illustrates a little better. And then the third component is an easement with Avista. All of these pieces are needed in order to construct the water line. So as I noted, the area in yellow is the property purchase. This is really to illustrate how this is laid out adjacent to existing city-owned parcels. As I mentioned in the beginning, the city's outfall, wastewater outfall, is currently through this property. The white rectangular roof to the left of the yellow is owned by the city. Across the road, north of Lundy, that is also owned by the city. That is pending ownership, but that is currently will be owned by the city. The purchase of this yellow section of property will give us additional space in maintaining existing infrastructure and also future infrastructure. Total cost, so for the easement purchase and property purchase with Treend and Schons, that is $50,000. The easement purchase with Avista Utilities through the Wave Park is $6,849.75. How we arrived at that is calculated, I'm sure. So recapping recommendations, Staff is making the recommendation that city authorize the purchase of the easements to facilitate the water line construction. This also fulfills the contract obligations made as part of the outfall project. This also includes the purchase of that property I noted in yellow. The largest benefit of that is it provides, as I noted, access for existing utilities. There is an existing lift station that we would anticipate upgrading at some point, allows additional space to do that type of work. It also accounts for a planned future recycled water line that would eventually cross to the south side of the river. I mentioned timeframes in the outline. I do not have an actual slide, but to provide the next steps, following approval this evening, we would recap with our consultant engineer, revisit the bidding, finalize the bidding documents, and then revisit the bidding and construction timeline. So looking at a time that would be reasonable to put this out for advertisement and begin construction. The plans are actually finalized at this point, so this has been the missing piece in being able to move forward. With that, I will stand for any questions.
Council, questions, comments? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move to approve purchase and sale agreement with Treend, Schons, Lundy Easements and Property, and the purchase and sale agreement with Avista and Lundy Easement.
Second.
Motion is second. Clerk, please take the roll.
Westland.
Aye.
Shove.
Aye.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Motion passes. Moving along, Prairie and Fennecus Roundabout Art Proposal.
Council President, Councilors, Bob Seal, Community Development Director for the City of Post Falls. Here to just talk briefly, hopefully, about the Prairie and Fennecus Roundabout. There's proposed artwork to be hopefully installed there. The proposal is coming from the Jacqueline Land Company. They're the ones that are developing Jacqueline Ranch, or the formerly known as Haycrop subdivision. Just to the north of there. They were also the ones that constructed the roundabout last year in preparation for that intersection. Staff requests the approval to work with the developer to engage the artist. Showing you a little location as to where we're talking about and the proposed project. So once again, we've got a roundabout that was developed with the intention of being able to put some kind of sculpture or artistic structure in the middle of it. Again, as opposed to just some landscaping and or hardscaping. The various roundabouts around the city, a lot of them are just landscaping, or especially the ones that were developed in the county, just that hardscape. And Jacqueline really wanted to be able to provide something here that would be unique and represent the city of Post Falls, as well as representing the former use of the land as the grassland for the farming. So what ultimately happened was we had discussed some different ideas with the Jacquelines regarding kind of what they wanted to do, and then when TAG went on a trip down to, I believe it was Arizona, met with a artist down there that does these sculptures, and he just loved the concept, loved the idea, and is coming back with this proposal for the farmer, plow, and donkey. In addition to this life-size structure, which the platform I believe is about 15 feet, and which would put the whole structure at about 14 feet across, I believe is what it was. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Taking up the majority of the center structure, let's just say that. In addition to this, we had talked about, can you put some grass around the edges to kind of add to it and have it raised. And he is proposing to have kinetic sculpture put in there instead of actual additional new plantings. And these are the type of kinetic sculptures that you can see actually move a little bit while they are in place. This is coming to you again because this is in the city right-of-way. The applicant, or not the applicant, the developer will be working with the artist to get it commissioned and constructed and then installed, following all our building codes and codes within the engineering division to make sure that this meets all our standards here. The cost is being covered by the Jacquelines, and long-term, after the warranty is over, the city will take over maintenance of it. Do you have any questions for me?
Council?
So this artist is from,
He's from, I believe it was Sedona, Arizona, I believe is
okay,
where it
that's
was
where
out
he
of.
works out of?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
where he's located at. Tag had gone down there and seen a sculpture of a large horse that was famous for the area. And so he sought out who created that horse. Well, the horse was created by a gentleman who has since passed away, but this guy had worked under him at the time. And so he learned from that sculptor.
And then the artist for the sculpture going up in 4th and Idaho is from?
That guy's from Colville.
Okay. I really appreciate that we've, like, in the last, 3 months, added 2 new large pieces of artwork to the city. My only request that would be that your department maybe let developers know that's a priority of at least one city council member, that we use some local artists, and maybe start seeing some of their stuff. But otherwise, I think it's great, and I really appreciate the Jacqueline's making it a priority to do it.
Yeah.
Further comments? With that, I would entertain a motion.
I move to approve Prairie and Fennecus Roundabout Arc proposal.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Please take the roll.
Stigleader.
Aye.
Walker.
Aye.
Malloy.
Aye.
Ziegler.
Aye.
Westland.
Aye.
Schob.
Aye.
Thank you much.
That concludes new business. Up next is citizen issues. This section of the agenda is reserved for citizens wishing to address the council regarding city-related issues that are not on the agenda. Anybody wishing to speak? Come on up, please say your name for the record, and you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Ruben Rodriguez. I want to start out by saying thank you to all you guys for and girl for your the work you do for the city. You know, I like just listening to your comments and how much you care and how much you share about it. It's pretty awesome. I like that a lot. And anyways, I am with Idaho Sunshine. It's a new organization here in Idaho. We are sponsored by Arizona Sunshine, which has been happening for the last 10 years. It's a free medical, dental, and vision clinic that we're going to be putting on here in Idaho. And our first location that we're going to be doing it is going to be the Kootenai County Fairgrounds. And it's one of those things where Arizona started this about 10 years ago, where they saw the need for free dental and vision and medical, and they wanted to try to. They've been doing it every year, sometimes 4 different cities, and going out to different places and sponsoring it and getting people to kind of just fulfilling the need for the clinics. Anyways, so we're doing this. This is gonna be our first year of coming here. We've been passing out these flyers and trying to get more people to advertise for us. It's all strictly volunteers. We got a lot of dentals coming from California and Arizona, dentists and doctors, even a denturist coming. And this is kind of just an informative presentation here. Wanted to show you just kind of what we got going on. It's going to be September 20th and September 19th, and it's going to be pretty much no strings attached. You don't need insurance, no registration. It's first come, first serve, and it's going to be just something we're hoping that's going to be an annual event and help out the community that way. That's about it. Anybody have any questions?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you have any more flyers?
I have lots of flyers.
And please make sure to get one to the clerk too, so we can get it in the record.
Yes, I will. Yeah. It's actually, here's another thing too. It's going to be more than just the medical and dental. We're going to have hairstylists. We're going to have chiropractors. We're going to have a legal team if people want to put wills together, and different things like that a lot of people can't afford to do. So we're going to try to offer that too. We're going to have booths for clothing. If people don't have adequate clothing, we're going to have that. And we're just trying to help the community out and give back to the community where we can. So it's going to be a fun event, and our first events at Kootenai County Fairgrounds. We already reserved it for next year, so hopefully if everything goes good, we're going to be out there too. And we have over 100 volunteers already signed up, ready to be helping out. We have a bunch of dentists from Arizona coming and doctors, and it's gonna be a good event. So I'm looking forward to it. So.
Can you utilize non-medical volunteers?
Oh yes, 70% of our volunteers are non-medical, so you do not have to be medical to be a volunteer. We do very strict screening on our volunteers. We're going to be doing free childcare, and we're going to have a security team, and there's quite a bit going on in there too. But yeah, you do not have to be a medical to be a volunteer there.
Nice.
So yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And everybody involved.
Yeah.
And yeah, leave a pile of flyers. Make sure the clerk gets one. And what we'll do we can to spread the word.
I appreciate it.
And thanks for sitting through an entire budget hearing
Yeah, no
and
kidding.
everything else.
It's very informative.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Up next, administrative staff reports. I show that we have none. Mayor and council comments. I guess I'll start. I missed last meeting, as most of you know. I was on my way to work. It'll be 3 weeks ago tomorrow on my sadly former motorcycle, but heading westbound on Celtice Way near State Line. Vehicle coming the other way without signaling or anything turned directly in front of me to go into a gas station, and I went for an unscheduled flight about 50 feet over the hood and into the road. One thing that I was, I guess, not expecting and kind of restored my faith in humanity is that literally within seconds, there happened to be a nurse waiting in line at the coffee stand across the street and saw the incident, and seemed like instantly was there, stabilizing my neck and guiding me through what to do and not to do. And in my head, I suppose I was expecting a crowd of people with cell phones just filming it for social media, and didn't see any of that. Within minutes, there was half a dozen people helping to direct traffic around me and keep me out of harm's way in that regard. And the sheriff's department was the first to arrive, and extremely professional, managed to make me laugh a couple of times. The EMTs were fantastic. And the outpouring of love and support from obviously friends and family, but from city staff and council and from the community at large has just been amazing, incredibly humbling. It's no small miracle that I came out of it as unscathed as I did. I do have 2 fractured vertebrae, fractured pelvis, fractured thumb, large hematoma in my pelvic area, lots of bumps and bruises, all that sort of thing. But I don't know how I didn't break my legs going over the top of the car. I don't know. One thing, I was wearing all my gear. I had my boots, riding jacket, gloves, helmet, so we were gear kids because that saved a lot. But anyway, somebody's watching out for me. I love my God. I love this town. And just thank you, everybody, for all the love and support that I've seen. This place is awesome, and I'm going to continue to serve as long as you guys will have me. So thank you to everybody who's reached out. Council comments.
We're glad to have you back.
Thank you. Yeah, sorry I'm a little bit slow getting around, but I've got my bionic suit armor on here, but getting there. We do not need an executive session.
We do not.
With that, I'll take another motion.
Move to adjourn.
Any seconds?
Second.
Please, all those in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.